We're going to start off problem number 1 with a quick review of some economics fundamentals of supply and demand. First is that on this graph, price is the vertical axis, so that's the dollars, and then units is the horizontal axis. On the demand function, if you want more units to be purchased, you want units to go up, then the price has to come down. So if you follow the curve, price is going down, it's getting lower, while units is going up. Supply is just the opposite. If you want manufacturers to produce more, you need to give them a higher price for each item that they make. So when price goes up, supply will go up, and it creates an increasing graph. So on problem number 1, we're given two equations, and one of them is a supply curve and one is a demand curve, but we have to figure out which one is which. Well, they're both linear equations, and this one has a positive slope. Positive slope is for the supply curve, so the supply curve is the 9q minus 31 because the slope of the supply curve is positive. Okay, now what limits can you put on the domain of the supply and the demand functions? Well, first let's get them graphed, and then we'll talk about what it means by domain. So the units, I'll put in, I don't know, we'll just start with 5 and 10. The supply curve is the 9q minus 31, and that's equal to P. That's a price. So when you talk about the value coming out of the supply curve, it's a price. The price is built from 9 times the units, take away 31, and then the demand curve, price is given by -3 times, get the units, and add 97. Copy those down. And what limits can I put on the domain of the supply and the demand function? Let's look at a graph of this quickly. Okay, now this is an Excel thing. So Excel makes its best guess for what you want it to do. The purple is what it thinks is the input values, and it's taking all of this text. And then all of the blue is the Y values. So notice that it's interpreted this incorrectly, and it's got 3 points for each series. The way you can fix that is you right-click and select data. You want to switch the row and the column so that the X values become the Q number of units instead of being the headers across the top here. And that looks better. So now see the X values are highlighted and the two Y values, and it's interpreting supply and demand. Okay, we'll add a chart element, go to a trend line. Notice that I haven't selected anything on my chart, and Excel realizes that and says, well, I have two things. I have supply and I have demand. Which one do you want to graph? I'll do supply first. And it found it and connected the dots, and I'll display the equation on the chart, which shouldn't be any surprise because I know the equation. But there's my 9x minus 31. And then add another chart element. Get the demand function and display the equation on the chart. So this just gives us a visual. So far we don't have too much more information, but what they want on this last problem is what limits can you put on the domain? Okay, domain is the input value. Here it's the number of units. And you have to picture this supply function extending in both directions. And right there is where the price would equal 0. You can't have a negative price. So that's a limit on what the domain could be. And then the other limit comes from the demand function. And it will eventually, somewhere way over here, hit the x-axis, the units axis. In the application domain, the domain that makes sense in the context of this application is that your units have to stay in between those two values. So let's try to find those. I want to know when the supply function would equal 0. There's the supply function. Let's do a what-if analysis. Goal seek. Set that to a value of 0. That would be a 0 price by changing the number of units. Hit OK. And then notice that my chart updated to include that new number of units. And you can see that's where my 0 value is. Let's do the same for the demand function. Ask goal seek to figure out when that cell would have a value of 0 and give me the number of units. And now let me clear all of my markings off of this. So the minimum number of units would happen when the supply function hit 0 at a value of 3.44. And then you could have up until the demand function hit 0 at a value of 32. So to enter it in, 3.444 has to be smaller than the number of units, which in turn has to be smaller than 32.333.